All right, let's get right into it. When a company says it's sustainable, who's actually making sure that happens? I mean, who's really on the hook? Today, we're going to pull apart the corporate governance blueprint from the GRI 2 standards. We're going to find out exactly who is steering the ship.
You see this all the time, right? A company makes a big, bold claim about being sustainable. But the real question is, who's in charge? Because the answer to that question, well, that's what separates a real commitment from just, a slick marketing campaign. It's easy to make a promise. The hard part is building the internal machinery to actually deliver on it. And that's what we're diving into today, the real architecture of accountability. So right at the very top of this whole structure, we find the key player, the highest governance body, or HGB for short. Now, you can just think of them as the board of directors or whatever that top-level group is called. And according to the GRI standards, their role is anything but symbolic. No, this is the group with the final say, which means they also have the ultimate responsibility for every single impact the company has.
Okay, so let's call the HGB what it is, the command center. This is where the buck stops for sustainability. It's the place where big vision gets turned into actual strategy, and yeah, it's where accountability really begins and ends.
And GRI is super clear about this. The HGB can't just be passive. They can't just sit around and wait for a report to land on their desk. No way. They have to be completely hands-on. They're the ones developing and approving the sustainability strategy. They're overseeing how the company finds and manages its impacts. And, this is so important, they have to be constantly checking in to see if any of it is actually working. And here's a really crucial piece for public accountability. It's not enough for these big discussions to happen behind closed doors. The standards actually demand a public statement from the very top that connects the dots between sustainability and the company's main strategy. It sends a message that is loud and clear. This isn't some side hustle or a pet project. It is absolutely central to how we do business.
So we've got the high-level strategy, right? The command center gave it the green light. But how does that grand vision actually make its way from a fancy boardroom down to the factory floor? Well, that brings us to our next step, crafting the actual blueprint.
And we're not talking about some internal memo that nobody ever reads. No, these policy commitments are formal, public statements. They are the company's official promise to act responsibly. And what makes them so powerful is that they're often built on big, internationally recognized frameworks, like the UN Guiding Principles or the OECD guidelines. That gives them some serious weight and credibility.
Okay, this is really where the rubber meets the road. Because, let's be honest, a policy sitting on a shelf collecting dust is completely useless. The standards say you have to actively embed these commitments into the DNA of the company. It's a whole system. First, you figure out who is responsible for what. Then, you weave it into how you operate every single day. You also have to bring your business partners and suppliers along for the ride. And finally, you have to train your people so they know what to do. It's like a waterfall of responsibility, starting at the very top and flowing all the way down.
All right, the policies are written, the systems are supposedly running, but who's watching? Who is making sure people are actually following the blueprint? This is where we get to the absolutely critical idea of oversight.
And I really want to land on this point. It is a total make-or-break moment. You can have the most amazing, perfectly written policies ever, but if no one is checking up on them, if there's no rigorous oversight, they're just empty words on a page.
The core of this oversight is something called due diligence. And please, don't think of this as a one-time checkbox exercise. It's not. It's a constant, proactive process. It's about always looking for your potential negative impacts, doing everything you can to prevent them, and if they do happen, figuring out how to make them less severe.
So here's the distinction that matters. The HGB isn't in the trenches doing the day-to-day work of due diligence, but they are overseeing it. They're supervising the whole process. They're making sure the company is actually talking to stakeholders. And this is the really key part. They take what they learn from all that and use it to make better strategic decisions. It creates this amazing feedback loop that goes right back to the top.
But what happens when things go wrong? Because sometimes they do. What happens when, despite all the best intentions and policies, a company's actions actually harm people? Well, that brings us to the final piece of this whole accountability puzzle.
It's called a grievance mechanism, and you can think of it as a formal way for people who've been negatively impacted to raise their hand and say, hey, this isn't right and it needs to be fixed. And let's be super clear, this is not a suggestion box. It's a structured, serious process for people to get a real solution, a real remedy. It's all about making things right.
Now, this is a really important distinction that often gets confused, so let's clear it up. Think of it this way. A grievance mechanism is for someone who has been personally harmed and is looking for a solution. Whistleblowing is different. That's for anyone, an employee, a customer, anyone, to report general wrongdoing, like fraud or breaking the law, even if they weren't hurt themselves. Both are absolutely vital, for sure, but they're designed for different things.
So, what makes one of these things actually work? Well, it all comes down to trust. The UN guiding principles, which GRI points to, give us a great checklist. You have to ask, is it legitimate? Can the people who need it actually get to it? Is the process predictable and fair for everyone? Is it transparent? And maybe the most important question of all, is the company learning from this so the same mistakes don't happen over and over again?
Okay, let's pull all of this together. We've talked about strategy from the top, policies that make it real, oversight to keep it on track, and a way to make things right when they go wrong. This is it, the complete picture of what good governance looks like.
Because here's the bottom line. Good governance is what makes all the difference. It's the system, the engaged board, the real policies, the watchful oversight, and the open door for feedback that transforms sustainability from just a glossy page in a report into how a business actually operates, day in and day out.
So these GRI standards, they give us the blueprint. They demand that companies show us their work. Which leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? With this blueprint for transparency right in our hands, how are we, as investors, as customers, as citizens, going to use it to hold power accountable? How do we make sure this all leads to real change in the world?